Good evening, family, and welcome to our latest edition of our TCR Dialogue. We are so grateful to be here with you to bring to you another interview. And so we have the Reverend Dr. Jennifer Leath. She is the professor of Queen's University, thank you, in Canada, where she is the associate professor of Black religion. She is also an author of the book Black, Queer, and Then to Wear: Theories of Justice and Black Sexual Ethics. And we are so glad to have you join us to have this very important conversation about something that transpired today. So thank you.
Thank you.
We're just going to jump right in. So our very first question is, there were a lot of conversations that were and were not happening on the floor today. And I think there came a point in the vote where we didn't really know what we were voting on. So can you take us through a little bit of what was happening on the floor before the vote and leading up to your resolution that you read?
Sure. So after the report was given for the Sexual Ethics Discernment Committee, that report was received as information. And then the motion that was being discussed a couple days ago was brought back. That motion had been postponed until we could receive this report, because this report pertained to the bill that was in question that the Revisions Committee had brought out. That bill, when it came out again today, was already in process. And so where the conversation was left prior to this point was in a place in limbo, because a motion to delete delete the bill had been offered. And while there were a couple speakers on that, ultimately, when the Sexual Ethics Discernment Committee's report was specified as a prerequisite to really handling this bill, that postponement meant that we arrived today. Right. And at this point where we needed to get clear as a body about what we were voting on exactly. And I think that part of the confusion had to do with the fact that the bill itself was to delete the same-sex marriage section in the discipline.
Okay.
And so the word delete can be confusing when it's used both among the for and the against.
Right.
And so we have to get clear about the moments when that amendment to delete the bill was being discussed, and when we were discussing the bill. Ultimately, what transpired was that we didn't really have a discussion. That there was a call for the vote that took the discussion time away, and as a result, there was an immediate vote, and the motion to delete the bill carried. And we had to multiple times ask for clarification to make sure we understood what we were voting on. And there were moments in which that was unclear. And so with this situation, there is a question in the back of my mind about whether or not people really knew what they were voting for.
And I have to be honest and tell you that I left with that same sentiment, looking at the vote and how things went even after I asked the question, do people really know what, even though they tried to explain it, but it just seemed like there was some double talk. And it did get very confusing when it was talking about, on one hand, deleting the bill, on the other hand, it was deleting the amendment. And so it was what really are we referring to? And as I sat in the back and I kind of watched people's reactions, and then we had some that came up in tears and they were just distraught and angered. And there was a lot of pain in the room. And it left me asking the question, what does this now mean for the church? What does this mean for all of the people that have been hurt by the silencing, the disregarding, the rejection?
Yeah. Well, as the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. And today, justice was denied. On many levels. And I think the most significant level is that of just having the opportunity to be heard and to be able to engage in a fair and a mutual and respectful conversation. That was the most offensive thing. That my colleagues were so scared to have the conversation, so disturbed by the possibility of hearing what others might have to say, that they thought it best to short circuit conversation. And also, I think the way that it was done, that was not interested in the body understanding, that was interested in confusion prevailing, and that was interested in winning the motion by any means necessary. That, again, was a sign of disrespect for the body and for the various people and various perspectives that are held within the body. I remember one of the comments that was made was that the church has a position on this. And the clarity of the vote is that the church is not clear about its position on this, and that we in the church have a diversity of opinions on this, and we always have, and we will consistently. One of the greatest tragedies of this moment is that the bill that was presented gave us a way to be together in our difference, gave us a way to hold different perspectives and maintain our community and connection with one another. And so it's a major disappointment that those who were able to triumph in the vote could not be content with being able to hold their positions. Some of them homophobic, some of them heterosexist, some of them limited with respect to love and justice. But even with a bill that would have allowed them to maintain their positions, they were not willing to entertain the possibility or to have a conversation about how others could hold a different belief. And so I think that the church is in a very dire situation because when we cannot speak openly and honestly and with integrity, we are doing the very thing that got us in trouble in the garden. In the garden, what was it? It was that the two they saw themselves a particular way and thought their creation in the image of God was something to be hidden, something to be swept away, something that God should not see. When in fact, God who created us is asking, is begging, is inviting our integrity, our transparency, and our wholeness. And so we have a lot of healing to do. For the church to be whole, we are going to have to find ways to disagree and also allow one another to maintain integrity and dignity in the disagreement. I also think, though, that we're going to have to find a way to think through how we condemn and judge one another. I think we've forgotten that the scripture says, judge not that you be not judged. I think that we have not only isolated a particular activity, perhaps, or relational pattern as itself sinful, that doesn't have biblical evidence, right, for such an indication, but we have not only isolated it, but we have obsessed over it, and we have done so to the exclusion of a whole lot of other things, and that is dangerous.
Very.
It's dangerous.
Very. Yes. There are so many thoughts that are going through my mind as I was thinking about some of the things that you said, as you talked about the healing that needs to happen. And you talked about the silencing and just not hearing, and there was something that you all wanted to say. There was something that you all needed the church to say, that you needed the church to hear. What is it through the bill, through the ethics committee, that what is it that you wanted the people to hear? So they wouldn't give you the opportunity to do it in here. We'd like to give you that opportunity now. What is it that you wanted the church to hear?
I wanted the church to hear that a person from the 18th district texted me this morning anticipating that we would be in this conversation, that we would be debating this bill, and said, please don't let them tell a narrative about Africa that erases me, that erases who I am as a queer person. Don't let them make it sound like we're not here, we don't exist, that we are not clergy people in the AME church, that we are not suffering, that we don't need the help and the strength of the church to reject laws that support the death penalty or other kinds of formal and informal vigilante and state-sanctioned violence against LGBTQ people. You know, that text touched me. And this person let me know, I'm praying. I'm praying that the church will hear. I'm praying that the church will see. And it breaks my heart that lies have been told, that there has been deceit that made it seem like that person doesn't exist, and that person is maybe an exception. That person is not an exception. There are many of us, and we are scared into silence. And it is most repulsive that the church is content for our silence to remain in place. I also wanted the church to hear that the path that we were offering today was not one of affirmation or endorsement for same-sex marriage or LGBTQ people. It was one that would have allowed every person to retain what they believe. But the difference that it would make for somebody like me is waking up in the morning each day and working my heart out within a church that thinks that God is displeased with me because of my sexuality or because of my gender identity. And waking up each morning knowing that I am serving God in a church where all of the clergy and laity are working out our soul salvation with fear and trembling and with humility before God. And that those details about gender and sexual orientation are not singled out in this way that they have been in a discipline. I wanted people to hear today that there is sin equity, and that even if you believe that homosexuality is, it would be highly inappropriate to treat this one differently than other ones. That is hypocritical. And we know what the Pharisees and Sadducees were accused of in terms of their hypocrisy and how antithetical that was to Jesus and to the love of Jesus. Jesus, the one who saw someone else doing good works in his name, and the disciples said, oh, we don't want that one. Jesus, could you tell him to stop? Or he shouldn't be doing that. Mm-hmm. And Jesus said, no, if he's not against us, he's for us. And so we don't have to all be the same. We don't have to all believe the same. We don't have to worship the same. We don't have to be in the same place at the same time doing the same thing. And that we would want to be so uh, um, homogenous, or that we would want to present a homogenous front in the AME church is devastating. I think that it's been proven quite clearly that diversity is our strength for any institution, including the church. In fact, why would we talk about the body of Christ and the different parts of the body if diversity wasn't a strength? In fact, God exists in three persons. Right? Even within God is diversity of person. And so we, I think, have done ourselves a disservice as the body. It is as though we have cut off limbs. It is as though we have decided that we don't like our ear, so we'll cut it off. Or we don't like our toe, and so we can do without it. And that's what today feels like. That's what's at stake for the church. That's the kind of thing that I would have wanted heard. I would have wanted heard the grandparents who have seen their grandchildren and love their grandchildren and want to be a part of their grandchildren's lives. The parents wanted to be able to hear from the pastors who have two parents of the same gender. I wanted for us to be able to hear about the diversities of families that exist within our church and that have created and sustained faithful, God-loving people. People who not only love God, but love their neighbors as themselves. These are the things. These are among the things. And again, to me, this was never a referendum on homosexuality. Today was not for that. This was not a referendum on whether it's okay to be gay, LGBTQ, or queer, as I like. Today was a referendum on whether or not we know how to coexist in our differences. And we proved that we can't, not in a respectful, dignified way.
And that was the heartbreak of today. Yes. That we made it about whose bed you're in or how you present yourself and not about care for one another. Yeah. And that was definitely evident in the way that so many were so grieved after. And so now having that have happened, knowing that we can't change what took place today, how do we move forward? What does that even look like? And especially for someone like yourself and for others, how do you even find your place in the midst of all of this mess? When you're told not to talk, when you're told to be quiet, or when you're told, sit down, we don't want this. How do you find your place, and how do we as a church move forward?
Well, I think part of what we need to do at this point is really to cultivate courage in people, to speak truth to power. Truth wins and love never fails. I do believe. And it might not win right away, but it will win. And I do believe that that's probably why people didn't want to have the conversation, because they knew that when you look at these things closely, the truth is clear. We can't deny the biology of gender and sexual difference, not when we have intersex people. Both gender and sexuality are clearly biological diversities that extend beyond male and female in those categories. That we have to get rid of. So again, that aside, and that kind of fact aside, we need people who are courageous enough to start speaking up and telling the truth and telling their truth. And And the burden can't just be on LGBTQ people. We need more pastors. One pastor came up to me after the business session today and said, we have to have this conversation. I had a young man to take his life. And he's not the only one. Another pastor had a mother who's now grieving because her son, after she found out that he was gay and maybe didn't respond in the most loving or affirming way, that child, again, taking his life. Children are dying. Children are dying because we won't act in love. And I don't mean the love that says we love you, but we hate this thing. I don't mean that love. That's not love. That's not love. Love does not cause one to question their life, or their life's value, or whether it's best to harm themselves or to take themselves out. And so the kind of courage that we need is from bishops on the bench who don't have children and grandchildren who are gay. We need courage from general officers who have themselves had some experiences with people they have pastored along the way, and are able and willing to say, I must speak. I cannot remain silent. I will not let another child die on my watch. How dare we not even be willing to give voice to the suffering of these children who bring so many gifts and talents and Holy Ghost anointing in our churches. I mean, you know, the thing is, when I think about where we go from here, it can't fall on the courageous LGBTQ people and their allies, and their obvious allies alone. We need to cultivate newly courageous people who are willing to say, I can't let this happen. I will not be okay. Knowing that I got over slaves obey your master, knowing that I got over women be silent in the church, knowing that I got over polyester and shrimp, knowing that we would apply a different kind of biblical hermeneutic, a different kind of interpretation to these things while people die because of it. No, not acceptable. And so I think that, you know, my place in the church will be this. Will be this until we figure this out. Because, you know, for whatever reason, this is my vocation. This is what God has given me to do. I sometimes wish the assignment were different, but this is the assignment. And I refuse to just speak on behalf of others, but will do my very best to make sure that others have voice and that others are also protected as they give voice, and to really pray that we as a church see our way to a place where we can be whole and be together. I don't know what else to do than that, to cultivate courage and to pray. And for those of us who are on the battlefield, to do our best to keep on keeping on. But again, the burden must be shifted. One of the things that came up twice on the floor today, in two comments that were made, that highlighted the problem of deleting the bill and the importance of the bill. was the problem of white supremacy and the way that the handling of this matter is replicated. The very same kind of oppressive tactics and gaslighting and deceit that we encounter with white supremacist culture all day, every day. And it's a shame that we would do that to ourselves. But this is why the proverb is there, and we thou not the oppressor and choose not his ways. For the forward is an abomination. That's the abomination. To deny our kin, and to do what has been done to us. And so, we must just and push forward. But I pray that we don't get to the point where those of us who are part of this tradition have to do what Richard and Absalom did. When they had to say, allow us to finish our prayer, and we'll let you, and you can have this. That would be a very unfortunate situation, and it's my prayer that it doesn't come to that. But when the narrative is spun the other way, people who are going to leave the church because we take a position of neutrality and silence, that's a very low bar to leave on, especially for those of us who have stayed and remained through years and years of homophobic, heterosexist preaching, teaching, singing, liturgies.
Yeah. You mind if I hold your hand? I want to say to you in this space, thank you. I know that you have been on the battlefield, you have been fighting, but I thank you for being the voice for those that could not and cannot. I thank you for being the courage for those who can't, for whatever reason, find theirs. And I pray that somewhere within this space, that you are, and that you are replenished, and that you are restored. And know that God has called you for such a time as this. Because what we experience collectively is that right now they need a champion. And they need someone to hold up the flag. And so we thank you for doing it. And so for those of you that are out there listening, Dr. Leath has issued a charge, and we have to cultivate courage. And just more of the, like she said, those that have direct allyship. But we have to be courageous. And we have to stand beside our siblings in this fight. And we have to shift the burden so that they're not carrying the cross alone, because Jesus didn't even have to carry his own cross. And so, Dr. Leath, thank you for taking the time to not only break down the bill, but even recall us back to our humanity and our care for one another. And prayerfully, more allies will raise up, and you all will be able to walk side by side, and at the very least, have your voices heard and be seen. Thank you so much. And so until our next interview, thank you all for joining, and we hope that you all have found this to be meaningful and that you will join us for our next TCR dialogue.